Okie dokie. This month I have done something a little bit creative. I have cut paper. It's over the page. I've cut paper. I've got little pickies in there. I've done a little bit of watercolor. I don't think it's a Dutch door. I think it's more of a creative papercraft setup for my journal, and I'll show you what it is now and then stick around to see how I made it. So I've got a landscape theme with a couple of Australian animals, and this is just a simple painted page, but then we turn this page and that's where the kind of Dutch door element comes in because it's been trimmed. Nothing on the top of that one. My monthly calendar. Then we turn this one and this flips over to here. And we have my sleep tracker and my mood tracker. I have got to the point with my journaling, because I've been doing this type of journaling for 5 years now. I know what works for me and I tend to stick to the same kind of format. So my sleep tracker will look like this. It will have the sleep tracked, it will have when I'm reading, and it will have when I have been looking at socials on my phone. So that's how my sleep tracker will look here. I haven't picked the colours yet. And I might just use that green again, which is a Tombow marker 177. And my mood tracker, at the moment I've been tracking just between 1 and 5 my mood, so I can see where I'm sitting, and if I have a mood that changes during the day I mark it twice. I could mark it 3 times if I wanted to, and then I just write notes that kind of explain why I had that mood. Then we flip over another unadorned page. That's because I didn't want it to get too cluttered at the top. This is my gratitude tracker, very simple, just 1 line a day. And my liquids tracker, I have shown this many times before, and it has been successful in getting me to drink more liquid. Especially water. Last year I was regularly only filling in 3 waters a day. And then a doctor told me to get my act together, and so I have. So that was part of the motivation, but also having this here means I've got something, a target to reach. So I'm trying to get 6 waters a day. So that's water, tea or coffee, non-sugar drinks that aren't tea or coffee or water, and then this is sugar drinks, so wine, hot chocolates, anything like that. Then we have another flip top, and we've got an emu and some more trees, so it works quite well as a scene there as well. And then we flip it over and it layers. Beauty of the cutouts. And here we have my step tracker, where I can track up to 10,000 steps. If I do more than that, it'll be a plus. I tend not to. I'm not a big walker, so you can see I'm quite happy when I get 4,000 a day. And then in here, this looks a bit random, but it is just going to have a sticker each day, probably one of these I can't see any on top. Probably one of these snowflake stickers, I think, or I might use one of these stickers, quite old, from the washi tape shop. And every time I do exercise, I will put a sticker in. I might use both and use this one for when I skip, and then the others for any other form of exercise. So that is the plan there. I'm always mixing up this what I do for my exercise tracker. And then finally It's Easter holidays coming soon, and so I am going on a road trip for 10 days with my dog. And so I thought I would just do just a little bit of route planning here basically. Then I will go into a photo gallery and then my dailies. So a photo gallery looks like this. I will have a tip-in, which is thinner paper, and that will allow me to not use so many pages in this journal, and I can use up some pages from a journal I don't value quite as much. It's definitely thinner paper, which means it doesn't get as bulky either, because this is 150 GSM, this journal. Then I just literally do a little bit of backing with some washi tape, maybe a sticker, and just put in photos. And then my dailies, so I'll have a photo gallery like this to add in on this month, and then my dailies are just the same as always, 5 to a double page spread with some more photos. So that is the plan. I did have another gallery there, but today we are going to be going through how I made this creative spread. Now, in the past, when I talked about doing layered cutouts, I have used a different technique using Procreate, and I did layers in Procreate so I could see how the layers looked with each other. If you watch my video on my dogs in backyards layout, which I adore, I used Procreate to do that one, and you'll see that in the video. This time, I just used tracing paper because I had a very simple design. It was only 4 layers, 2 of them are fixed and 2 of them are flipping. I was able to just use some tracing paper. And what that means is that I could lay it over the design on my front and my back page and work out where to place the things that would go on the inner pages. In this case, a few trees, a kangaroo, and an emu. So you'll see I just drew them out on the tracing paper in the location I thought that would work on the design. I was able to shift it around a little bit to make sure I had the right placement. And then you'll see that to transfer the design, I didn't have to draw it again. Simply turn the tracing paper over. You shade it the back of the design with lead pencil, and then you can lay that tracing paper with the shaded side down over your design. Because your paper's transparent, you can line it up, and then you just draw with your pencil over the line of your drawing again, and it will transfer the lead onto your page the right way round. So it's just a little cheap technique. I think I learnt this at school years and years ago, but it works really, really well. You get a nice, reasonably faint line, and then you can draw it properly afterwards. Then I had to cut it out. So I've got a cutting mat behind each page. I'm not cutting out the front and the back page. I'm only cutting out the middle pages. There are a couple of other pages that just had the whole bit cut off. I used scissors to cut them down. Just easier to control than a knife. But for the ones with the cutout design of the kangaroo and the emu, I had to use my X-Acto knife. I replaced the blade so that it was brand new and very sharp, because that meant that I can handle the finer detail a bit better. Slip the cutting mat behind the page and then cut around the penciled design. The trick with the design is to make sure that there is enough connection with the page below that it's not going to flop about or break or anything like that. I think the riskiest connection I made was the legs of the emu. They're a little bit thin. I hope he hangs on. If he doesn't, I'm just going to have to use some transparent tape or something to hold him in place. But otherwise, the other designs held on really well. You use a knife to cut out any gaps in the middle of each design. But the main thing is just make sure you don't make a mistake and cut your design off. Have to cut fairly close to the spine, but I didn't cut right to the spine because I don't want the pages to fall out, the other pages that page is connected to. So it looks a little bit messy, but it is essential to leave that little strip in the middle because otherwise your page will fall out. So working on the design, I first remove a lot of the lead pencil because I am going to be working with watercolour paints. When you use watercolour paints, once you've painted over lead pencil, it pretty much doesn't erase. So you're better to remove as much of it as possible before you start painting so that you don't have it showing through your painting. It just looks a bit unprofessional when you've got the lead pencil showing through. You'll notice I haven't yet coloured in my lettering, and that's because I plan to use a water-based marker, a Tombow marker, to do my lettering, and I was worried that I might accidentally splash the page with water while I was doing my watercolour painting, and that would have left an absolute mess on the lettering. So I did the painting first and then did the lettering afterwards. Look, this isn't fancy watercolour, right? This is not watercolour paper. It's not bad with watercolour, but it does crinkle a bit, but at least it shows the shading and things. But you'll see a little trick I've done here is to swirl the paintbrush in one colour and then I've lightly swirled it in another colour, and that means that you get a lovely dual shading of colours through your painting. Make sure when you're painting mountains that they are they shouldn't be green. Distant mountains tend to be like a purpley blue sort of colour or grey. They're not rich green, so it's something about the atmosphere that makes them lose their green colour. Then I've simply got my watercolour paints and I have done layers of green. Really? Nothing fancy. I've really kept it simple with this painting. Painting the kangaroo obviously is a little bit more technical. I have just copied a photo to get the shape of the kangaroo when I sketched it, and I've once again used a couple of colours of paint on my paintbrush, just gives a more natural finish. One thing to remember here is to put in shadows and things that are at the back, like the other leg, on the other side of the kangaroo, they need to be a little bit darker. So just a few little techniques there that you need to remember. Don't forget to shade the hip area so that the leg stands out properly. Just think about where shadows are likely to appear. They're likely to appear on the inside of things, the underneath of things, so there's shade on the bottom of the tail, on the bottom of the neck, behind the ear. Think about it that way. Then I have filled in my lettering. So as I said, didn't want to do it first. The way I've timed all this means that while I'm doing things like the lettering, and you'll see later I was still doing boxes and little things like days of the week, it means that the paint gets time to dry. The slowest part about this whole process was waiting for the paint to dry so I could turn the page. I have been known to use a hairdryer to speed that up, but it's not great. It does make the page warp more if you use a hairdryer. and it can change the look of the paint. I mean, these aren't fancy paints. I did use my cheap student paints. I've painted the dividing picture, and then I have to paint the back of the dividing picture so that it can be viewed from both sides. For my trackers and boxes, I have simply used a Jelly Roll Moonlight pen in 431, which is a tealy sort of colour. And for all my numbers, I've used a Zebra Sarasa clip pen, a brown one in 0.5. Nothing fancy at all in how I've done my layouts, although the lettering's quite cool. I'm quite happy with how it looks. I hope you enjoyed that run through of how I put together this series of layouts. I think it's cute. I'm really happy with it. I think the lettering I chose works really well with it, and I am really excited to use it. Think about trying something like this yourself. It was pretty straightforward. The main thing is don't put something on every page because you need it to not look too crowded. It looks really cool at the moment, especially like when I've got one each side, but even when they're doubled up, it still looks pretty good. So have a good April. I'll see you soon. Bye.